So, we are talking today about the magical process of microdosing, especially our mycelium friends, those that have psilocybin specifically. My guest is Eric Russell, one of PMP's esteemed coaches, a beautiful heart-led being. Eric, I'm assuming that you have quite a history with the process of microdosing. You created a course about it. So, what makes you love mini doses of mushroom medicine? Tell us
Oh,
about what it's done for you.
yeah, it's a great question. And I love this question because it is actually the answer to why I ultimately got into the plant medicine space in the first place. Because microdosing kind of warmed me up to the process of being kind of curious and intrigued with the world of plant medicine and how I can integrate that as part of my life. And so microdosing was kind of like a more of an easy way, an easier path for me to go, okay, because I came from a very conservative background. I grew up in Texas, and you can only imagine like what the culture was like there in terms of like social stigma around like drugs, these type of medicines, and all that type of stuff. So I had to warm up to it a little bit before I like took my first few journeys. But I think microdosing was the thing that allowed me open up to like all of the possibilities that plant medicine and the healing space could offer me. And so it was like a little foot in the door for me for this space. And it not only provided me that path, but it gave me so many like benefits along the way, like increased access to my own intuition, increased creativity flow. Um, like I was able to really, because I always felt like I got in my head a lot in terms of trying to come up with new ideas or pursuing things that maybe like that weren't necessarily all that aligned, but I did them anyway because I was listening to everyone outside of myself, if you can imagine. So microdosing really allowed me to start tapping into myself and really looking within in terms of what I really wanted to be doing and what I was really passionate about. And it encouraged a lot of self-reflection and questioning and getting more curious about my own self-discovery process, which ultimately led me to getting more involved with plant medicine and having more ceremonial experiences. But I think, again, like microdosing really opened me up to all of that world.
What a beautiful articulation of that opening, because I think your story is super relatable. A lot of us come from programming where we're like, ooh, these plant medicine things, like, is this really not only okay and ethical, but something that we as individuals feel aligned to? And it's really beautiful to get to know mushrooms in particular in a microdosing way because we can titrate into that relationship and not have to take a heroic dose out of the gate and be confronted to the edges of our capacities. To have that be a slow and intentional relationship building, I think that's really beautiful. And then we can do whatever we feel is right from there, right? Some people stay in a place of microdosing forevermore and don't feel called to a heroic dose. Nothing wrong with that at all. But what you're naming around increased creativity and especially relationship to intuition, I think that's part of the result of, if we use the scientific term, neuroplasticity, that this medicine clears pathways in our minds that creates some quiet, some peace, especially I have a history of rumination and it's helped me just just not have to be spinning all the time. But I love the description you used around connecting more to intuition, around like to our true selves and making choices from there rather than fear-based mind, like so powerful. If that's the only thing that microdosing can do for people, it's life-changing. So what are some of the other things that, especially people who might be new to this process, we can't promise anything, right? But what can occur? What are some of the potential benefits?
Yeah. So science is already starting to illuminate tons of potential benefits of microdosing, and we're just really scratching the surface with it all. But one of the big benefits, and it has to do with like the brain and neuroscience and all that stuff, but they're showing that microdosing is really tied to the regulation of our nervous system, like the autonomic nervous system. And so within the autonomic nervous system, we have like the sympathetic state and also the parasympathetic state. And so usually us humans, we're really not supposed to stay in sympathetic state all that long. We're really supposed to stay mostly in a parasympathetic state for our own kind of health and well-being. But given like the inundation of the internet, cell phones, distractions, all of that stuff, we tend to stay in a sympathetic state, which is kind of detrimental to our, overall kind of state of being. Like our nervous system is always on hyperdrive. And so how can we turn that down? How can we turn the dial down a little bit? And that's where microdosing comes in. And it's able to really help us switch from that sympathetic nervous system state back to a parasympathetic state, which we're actually able to rest and digest. That's kind of like what the system is telling our body that we need to do. And the way that the microdosing really helps microdosing kind of comes into our system and helps regulate that process and helps us get into that parasympathetic state. And what they're showing is not only does it help us do that, but it helps us become more open to other types of activities that also calm the nervous system, such as meditation, yoga, breath work, like cold plunging. Like these are all kind of techniques that we can integrate into our microdosing routine that have a synergistic effect on the actual experience with microdosing. So we're more able to tap into that parasympathetic state, or more likely to upregulate the receptor in our brain called the 5-HT2A receptor, which kind of modulates the overall experience of being more open, being able to articulate yourself more clearly, and combined with this parasympathetic state and also like the kind of the well-being practices that can become more of like uh, an optimal system in a way.
What you are speaking to is so powerful in two ways. One, the regulation. Like, I mean, who among us couldn't use more assistance in regulating the fight or flight kind of responses of our nervous system? But something you just named feels so powerful in that microdosing can help facilitate us naturally making choices to do the meditation, the cold plunges, etc. This is something I think a lot of us come up against. We know these things are healthy, and yet we sometimes are really self-critical of not being able to create a disciplined or consistent habit with any of these things. And a lot of times it's not because we're not smart enough, we're not powerful enough. It's because that switch is so deeply flipped of being in that sympathetic response, it's not even accessible. We can be brilliant about it. I confronted this myself of like, I'm so smart with this. Why can't I do it? Because my system isn't regulated. And so the piece of allowing the microdosing to come in and help regulate then gives us spaciousness to make choices that actually are aligned with maintaining that state. And so not to be so hard on ourselves that, we know better, but we're not doing it. That's because the switch is flipped. And these amazing alchemists of the forest are so good at helping us to come back to a place where we can make that choice. Sometimes the choice isn't even available. So,
Mhm. Yeah, and like interesting story about that too is I was able to establish a consistent meditation practice into my day because of microdosing. Like it was because of microdosing I was able to like get up at like 5 a.m. every morning and just integrate like 30 minutes of meditation into my day. And so now it's a habit. If I don't do it, I feel off. I feel like, oh, like I didn't meditate. I need, and so like it got me into this consistency, this habit forming pattern where I was able to integrate this kind of like well-being practice, that one that really serves my life in a very positive way, into my kind of my everyday reality, which is great.
so good, lasting change. Okay. So I know a lot of people that have tried to take on this process of microdosing without being overly intentional. Like, so we live in a world where we're kind of programmed of, oh, just take the pill will do the thing for you. we know that creating a relationship with a plant like psilocybin mushrooms, it doesn't quite work that way. And so some people are just stepping forth, they're taking the mushrooms and they're going about their day, and then they're like, well, not a lot is changing. So we know that intentions, being very conscious of creating that relationship is really the heart of what can create long-term lasting effects. And I know this is why you created a course to help educate and empower people to like really maximize the relationship they're building with mushrooms. So can you tell us a little bit about the Essentials of Microdosing, the course you created that helps people to facilitate these relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. So the course, like, first of all, really touches on kind of the foundational element, which is really understanding what microdosing is, what the kind of science supporting it, and what we can like how we can integrate it into our lives. I think that's like a very foundational piece of what the course offers up front for people. So so that way like we don't go straight into, this is what you need to take. This is like the intentions you need to set. I think it's really important to establish like a really good defining foundation before people go into the course. But once they have that foundational understanding, then it's really about, okay, like what is your kind of intention for going into the microdosing experience and understanding your why for entering the relationship with psilocybin, with like the mushroom, because that's like, honestly, like 50% or more of the experience is really understanding like why are you called to really work with the mushroom spirits, and like why are you, cultivating this lasting relationship. And it is like a commitment. Like you're essentially saying like, okay, I'm going to be microdosing, so therefore I'm going to be weaving in the medicine into my everyday life on like a more practical daily level. And so you have to be a little bit more cognizant of the relationship that you're building with the medicine. And so the way that I usually do this is not only do I set intentions and set my why for why I'm doing this and why I'm entering the relationship with mushrooms, but I also think about like, okay, how can I establish more of a close relationship with the spirit, with like the actual medicine. And so I establish like rituals during my day, like before I actually take the pill or take the capsule containing the psilocybin. I take the capsule, I put it next to my heart, and I just like really focus on what I really want to achieve and how I want to bring the spirit of psilocybin into my day, so that way they can really guide me and protect me and whatever it is during the day. So it really feels like I'm connected with the molecule of psilocybin kind of entering my body. And so it's like what that's just like an example of a intentional ritual that I do. But some others could include just taking a pause like during the day and just like checking in with yourself, really feeling your body and asking it's like, okay, like where in my body do I feel different? Where in my body am I needing attention or support? And so these are just like all intentional ways of working more, I guess, intimately with the medicine itself.
So what you are teaching people is to be in more intimate union, connection with the medicine, which is so beautiful because I know that you adore the science of why this works, but we the plant medicine people and people like us really approach this from a relationship perspective because they are sentient and conscious. And
Mhm.
so to treat them as such is like core way to maximize what they can offer us. So the course includes just cultivating that relationship, ideas of rituals, things like that. Do you also help people to do the integration part, to interpret the communications, sometimes subtle, sometimes not? Like, is that part of what you offer? Is to help people figure out what the heck is going on?
Yeah, yeah. I think part of that also is really calibrating like how much you actually need to take, first of all, of psilocybin, but then like during the day, really being able to engage in a self-reflection process and ask yourself, okay, like how am I feeling now? And so that way you can kind of get a general gist of whether there's going to be any changes like a little bit later in time. So if you move maybe like a few days out or maybe like a couple weeks out, you may then like check back in with yourself and ask like, okay, what has actually changed? What's like shifted? Like, do I need to recalibrate like the dose or like how I'm taking the medicine or whatever it is? That's like one piece of it. And the other piece is really noticing what changes are occurring over time. Because you set that baseline up front. So that's like really important to establish kind of that emotional, physical, spiritual baseline of how your overall like how you're feeling ultimately like during that period of time, but then moving a little bit more towards the middle to the later half of your microdosing regimen to then start noticing what changes are occurring in that baseline. Are you starting to get like more positive, more negative? Are you starting to feel like into your intuition more? Are you starting to get more creative ideas in this aspect? So it's about noticing those little things because you've already established that baseline ahead of time. And so in a sense, like it's about noticing those differences and then making sense of them so that way you can integrate that as part of like your daily routine. Like if you're seeing like yourself having more creative ideas on doing this task, for example, then you could your next microdosing day can do that task again, and then you could like intentionally be like, okay, I'm going to set aside time to really dive in and start generating lots of creative ideas for my own benefit, for my own practical benefit, for like my work or like my study or whatever it is. Like for example, just a little quick example, I when I microdose on my microdose days, I typically create content on those days because it allows me to tap into the creative flow, allows me to not be judgmental of any ideas that kind of flow in, and I just kind of go with them. And I tend to make content. I tend to film myself during those days too because I'm a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more limber, and not and I don't let myself get in my head as much about like filming. So that's just like one example of how it's benefited me and how I've kind of integrated that practice like going forward.
That's super crafty of just timing things with what you know the medicine helps to amplify, especially with creativity. And we're speaking about the importance of being aware of what's shifting and changing. And I know from years of personal experience now, it is really helpful to have a coach, to have a mentor, and in this case, even a community of people that you can talk it through, that can reflect back, because sometimes we're shifting and changing and we don't see it. We don't even know it. Ayahuasca, my medicine, likes to tease me that the conscious mind is the last part of us to catch up with what the heck is going on. And so it's really, really powerful and valuable to have, a trusted mentor and community that's like saying, actually, I can see the shifts and changes and supporting us in that process. So it's beautiful what you're creating. March is the next launch of Essentials of Microdosing. Is that correct? How can people get involved?
Yeah, yeah. So if you're interested in the course, you're more than welcome to either email me at eric at drericrussell.com, or you can find me on Instagram at Dr. Eric Russell. But you can also, if you're interested in just signing up for the course because you're just like, I want to get into microdosing, then you can go to Plant Medicine People, and the course is listed on the courses, and we start on March 26th. So it's going to be very fun. And I also have an upcoming webinar coming up that I'll talk a little bit more about how my own personal journey with microdosing and how it's benefited me, and just how it can also benefit you if you're curious about getting a little bit more involved with the process in the full course.
And I will add that Eric is available for one-on-one coaching. If anybody listening would prefer to have private mentorship or wants to have a session before diving into the course, that is also available at Plant Medicine People, our resident microdosing guru, which is like so important, Eric, because like you said, so many of us are going to find our way to the plants through this like gentle introduction. And it's just so exciting to see the millions of people that are answering the call. So Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your passion about our mushroom friends. Good
Yes,
to
of course. Thank you for having me.
thank you all for listening. The information for how to get involved in the course or connect with Eric is below, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. Anything you want to hear about in the future about mushrooms, microdosing, plants, etc. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks, everybody.